Welcome to the Balance Brace, Part 3. You might be asking yourself, why do I need to learn advanced balance brace skills? Well, maybe you want to get more comfortable playing in current. Maybe you want to work on your hand roll. Or maybe you just want your roll in dynamic water to be stronger and more reliable. Advanced balance brace techniques can really help you get there. These skills will teach you more about how your body and your kayak interact with the water, and how to use your body more effectively when you are rolling. I love practicing Greenland rolls in my two rolling kayaks, in part just because it's really fun. But I think the bigger reason I do it is because it makes me a much better roller when I'm in a sea kayak and I am in dynamic water like surf or tidal rapids or whirlpools or whatever your jam is. But it wasn't until I came across this piece written by Warren Williamson that really put together, in my mind, how the skills you can learn from the Greenland rolling techniques can be applied when you're playing in a sea kayak. I strongly encourage you to read the whole piece, and you can find it at the address below. Now, I found this piece about a year before I met Warren, and I'll tell you what, if you have not seen videos of Warren rolling at Skookumchuck Narrows on the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia, or Deception Pass in Washington State, do yourself a favor. Go to YouTube and watch some videos of Warren paddling in big water. He is the OG of blending Greenland rolling techniques with dynamic water paddling in a sea kayak. Okay, let's get into it. Do you folks remember Daryl from Balance Brace Part 2? Here he is showing us a great balance brace. And in Part 2, we also learned how to capsize and recover into balance brace before recovering to the back deck. And you heard me ramble on and on about leg drive and floating on the water. Well, get ready to hear more about that. The ultimate goal here is to be able to do a balance brace with just your upper body floating on the water, with nothing in your hands. I don't expect anyone to be able to do a balance brace with just your upper body right off the bat. Going into the balance brace with nothing in your hands to give your upper body some buoyancy can seem pretty intimidating. I certainly couldn't have just jumped in and done it. I would have failed, capsized, and just hung out under the water with "what was I thinking?" going through my head as I reached for my paddle to roll up. In this video, we're going to work our way through a progression that could ultimately get you doing balance brace with just your upper body floating on the water, with nothing in your hands. And again, the reason for learning to do these advanced balance brace techniques is to improve your understanding of some key components of a layback roll: your leg drive, floating on the water, and how to smoothly recover to the back deck without sitting up too quickly. If you don't get all the way to the balance brace with nothing in your hands, that's absolutely fine. Work your way through the progression and get as far as you can. I think you'll still learn a lot. I am showing you a series of paddles, half paddles, and other bits that you can use in the learning progression. They are arranged in a general order of decreasing buoyancy from left to right, and they are what you can use to wean yourself off of the support the paddle gives you, and eventually getting you doing the balance brace with nothing in your hands. On the left, we have a Greenland paddle and a Euro blade. I think the Greenland paddle is a little more buoyant than the Euro, but not enough that we need to squabble about it. Both of these paddles provide a lot of support to your upper body as you are floating on the water in balance brace. Next, we have the Storm paddle. This is just a smaller Greenland paddle. It has a much smaller loom, and you use a sliding stroke with it. It often hangs out on my back deck as a spare paddle. Then we have the two half paddles. I don't know if the half Euro is any more buoyant than the half Greenland paddle, but one of them had to be first in the lineup. And then we have the Ugly Duckling. I made this little paddle, and can we really call it a paddle? When I was learning. And it helped me work my way to what you see next, which is the Norsaq. The Norsaq is an Inuit kayak hunter's tool. It is a throwing stick that was used to get more distance from a harpoon throw. And it's really handy for working on advanced balance brace techniques because it does not give your upper body much buoyancy. And if you don't have access to all these items, improvise. In this section, we're going to take a look at each of the techniques that you can work on as you progress with your balance brace skills. Keep in mind that these are advanced techniques and they can be difficult to learn, especially in a sea kayak. The sea kayak is much bigger than a traditional hunting kayak of Greenland, which is where these techniques were developed. I'm going to assume that you already have a good balance brace with the paddle in your hand. But if you don't, keep working on that until it's really solid and then move on to the harder stuff. Now, ideally, you have a partner who can stand in the water beside you and help you to recover as you are practicing. I hate to say it, but there will be some capsizes and you will need a little help. Learning these skills is a beautiful journey with some inevitable bumps in the road. If you don't have anyone who can help you and your flatwater roll is fairly reliable, then I suggest that you keep your paddle on the front deck of your kayak such that you can grab it and roll up if necessary. As you are learning, you may not always be successful with a given technique that you are working on. So rolling up will save you a lot of energy. And I am very sure that as you get better at these techniques, your roll will be getting better at the same time. The first technique we're going to look at is the balance brace with the Storm paddle. Remember, this paddle has less buoyancy than what Daryl is used to, so he has to work a little harder. He has to go slower. He has to be very precise in his body movements, and he has to be patient and wait for the Storm paddle to reach the surface. As you work your way down in the buoyancy of what you are holding in your hand, it gets harder to float your upper body on the surface of the water. This is John, and he is showing us the balance brace with the Ugly Duckling. He also throws in a capsize with a recovery to balance brace. We'll be doing a lot more of that. Here I am in Daryl's Sterling Reflection. I'm going to show a balance brace with the Norsaq and balance brace with nothing in my hands. Now, this kayak is really big and it's not outfitted for me at all, but I wanted to use it so that you can see me working hard. Floating on the water with only the Norsaq was tough for me in this kayak, and you can see me practicing some leg drive too, as I try to get to know the kayak. I know I need to figure out good leg drive and body position in this kayak, as balance brace with nothing in my hands will be even harder. And it's kind of funny watching me capsize the reflection, or more precisely, not fully capsize the reflection. The kayak is big for me and it has a ton of rocker. Given its shape and the fact that I do not weigh enough to displace it to its design waterline, I can't fully capsize this kayak. But hey, close enough. I want to discuss something now that you are welcome to consider. As I have said, as the buoyancy of the item you are holding in your hand decreases, the difficulty of the balance brace increases, and I'd say this relationship is pretty much linear. Your body movement and control have to be increasingly precise and smooth. There's less room to make mistakes. When you're working with a Norsaq or doing balance brace with nothing in your hands, even the littlest mistakes that would go unnoticed if you are holding your paddle will likely result in a capsize. I also mentioned that the advanced balance brace techniques are more difficult in a sea kayak. Sea kayaks have higher back decks than a Greenland-style rolling kayak, and this makes entering the water and recovering onto the back deck more difficult. In my Rebel Naya, or Warren's rolling kayak, which are Greenland-style rolling kayaks with a very low back deck, I can pretty much just slide into the water and then slide onto the back deck to recover when I'm doing the balance brace. One issue you may run into if you're trying to learn these techniques in a higher back deck sea kayak is that your PFD, depending on the type, can make the advanced balance brace techniques even tougher. A PFD with a thick back profile reduces the amount of room you have to lay back over your rear deck, and this can make entering the water and recovering to the back deck more difficult. Take a look at these two PFDs. They distribute the flotation foam very differently over the upper body, and the Nora has a much thinner back profile than the Ninja. I used to use a Ninja, but now I use a Nora because it is so much easier for laying back over the back deck of my sea kayak. Daryl's PFD is more similar in profile to the NRS Ninja, so the back profile of his PFD is pretty thick. Look at the difference in how far he can lean back when he is wearing his PFD relative to when he is not. He can get his head pretty close to the back deck when he is not wearing his PFD. You can really see this difference when Daryl goes into balance brace. Given all of these considerations, Daryl and I made the decision together for him to start learning the advanced balance brace techniques without his PFD. Folks, we shot more than 2 hours of footage for this video, and not one time is Daryl off leash with no PFD. I am always right next to him, standing in the water, ready to assist. Keep in mind that most people would never be practicing balance brace with a Norsaq, or with nothing in their hands, out in real conditions, or far from shore. Okay, that's not entirely true. I'm pretty sure I would. These techniques are best practiced in flat water close to shore, so just be safe, okay? I want to do a quick review of a couple of key balance brace fundamentals. Maybe you skipped balance brace part 2 and decided to jump straight to the hard stuff. Well, good on ya, but let's talk about floating on the water and leg drive. Both of these skills are critical to the balance brace, but also to rolling and to sculling. Floating on the water refers to floating your upper body on the surface of the water with your shoulders flat on the water. Leg drive refers to engaging your water leg into the thigh brace and rotating that same hip up and away from the water. Leg drive is what helps to right the kayak from a capsize, combined with sweeping your upper body onto the back deck of the kayak. This is a picture of the kayak and paddler in the balance brace position, and it shows some terms you'll hear me using a lot. The kayak is kept balanced on the chine by the engagement of the water leg in the thigh brace. And although you can't see inside the kayak, the water leg, in this case, is my right leg, the leg that's closest to the water when the kayak is balanced on the right side chine. With sustained pressure of the water leg in the thigh brace, coupled with rotating my right hip a little bit up and away from the water, you can stay in balance brace for as long as you want. My shoulders are flat on the water and my head is tilted back and I'm looking up at the sky. My legs are obviously pointed forward in the kayak, but my torso is rotated toward the sky, which helps me to get my shoulders flat on the water. My leading arm is pressed against the rear deck of my kayak. Keep it there while you are learning, as it's a great landmark for helping you to keep your shoulders flat on the water. The trailing arm is the one holding the paddle. I know this terminology might seem counterintuitive. Why isn't the leading arm the one holding the paddle and the trailing arm the one on the back deck? Well, I'm using the same terminology that Sherry Perry and Turner Wilson use in their excellent video, This is the Roll. They use these terms with respect to recovery onto the back deck, as opposed to entry into the water at the start of balance brace. So now think about your arm that's planted on the back deck. That arm is the first thing to come out of the water when you are recovering to the back deck. So think of it as leading your upper body onto the back deck. If I changed up the terms, it would cause all sorts of confusion. And I like that they came up with these terms. We could call one arm the paddle arm, but that would break down once you're holding a Norsaq or when you're holding nothing. I hope this clarifies things, and I strongly urge you to watch This is the Roll if you have not already. This is how my water leg would look inside the kayak in the photo I just showed you. The engagement of my water leg in the thigh brace and the rotation and lifting of my right hip, just a little, is what keeps the kayak balanced on its chine. In a big kayak, it's okay to lift your bum cheek up out of the seat in order to get your hip up and rotated away from the water. Here I am showing leg drive on the right side of the kayak, so my right leg is my water leg. Here I am showing leg drive on the left side of the kayak, so my left leg is my water leg. Here's a trick for recovering to the back deck when you are in a sea kayak with a high back deck, like this reflection. Just before you want to get to the back deck, relax your water leg for like a half second. Then quickly re-engage it into the thigh brace and do a little leg drive as you swing your torso onto the back deck. Okay, folks, it's time to get real. Starting with the storm paddle. This is Daryl's first attempt with the storm paddle, and I can tell by watching him that he is struggling with the loss of buoyancy that he was used to with a full-size paddle. You can see it when he enters the water and his trailing arm and the paddle just drop. I help him a little and he finds balance. He has to get used to pushing the storm paddle up to the surface. Getting the paddle to the surface of the water not only gives him a bit of flotation, but also gets his right shoulder flat to the water. And I know his water leg and hip are working hard to keep the kayak balanced on its chine. You might be thinking, what does it mean to push the paddle to the surface? Shouldn't I just wait for the paddle to float to the surface? Well, yes, you should wait for the paddle to float to the surface. But it's not quite that simple. Once you're working with a Norsaq, and then with nothing in your hand, then there's really nothing there to float to the surface. So then how do you get your paddle from being deep in the water to floating on the surface? Well, start with taking the hand of your leading arm, the one that's on the back deck, right about at the kayak seam and about halfway in the water. Think of this hand as locked vertically, but not horizontally. In other words, you can slide it back and forth along the kayak seam. If you slide that hand back a bit toward the tip of your stern, this will lengthen your whole body. This makes the use of your water leg more effective so that you can keep the kayak balanced on the chine while you are sorting out the paddle. And keep your head back as far as you can. This step will already help to bring the paddle up. But now, I want you to think of your trailing arm, which is holding the paddle, as active and not just passive, waiting on the paddle to float. You can push your leading arm to the surface, like actually try to reach it up to the sky. This will bring the paddle to the surface a little faster than if you just wait for it to float. Waiting for the paddle to float on its own can be tiring. And once the paddle is on the surface, you know the shoulder of your trailing arm is flat to the water. And this is really the objective. When you're doing balance brace with nothing in your hands, it's all about getting your shoulders flat to the water. After practicing for a bit, Daryl's got it. Notice the little leg drive trick that I showed you. He uses it to help himself recover to the back deck. Looks great. Daryl is getting better at bringing the storm paddle to the surface and keeping the kayak balanced. A lot of learning to balance brace with a smaller paddle is just trying to be patient and get used to how it feels. I was so happy with his capsize and recovery to balance brace. I was telling him to be patient and get the paddle to the surface of the water before he recovers. He does this and it works. Daryl is starting to work on his left side, which is the more difficult side for him, as it is for me. I really believe that the brain needs some time to figure out how to roll on our non-dominant side. For me, it's like I'm trying to roll while looking in a mirror. Daryl's trailing arm and paddle are deep in the water, and I suspect fatigue was setting in. When your trailing arm and your paddle are deep in the water and you just don't want to fight with trying to get the paddle to the surface, there is a way to reset. Drop back down into a full capsize, then close up your upper body tight and bring the paddle to the gunnel. Now you're just back in the coiled capsize position. Start your leg drive as you open your upper body into floating on the water, pushing the paddle up and away from you. See if you can then return to balance brace or just recover to the back deck, whichever you like. You saw me use a modified bow rescue using my hands like the bow of a kayak for Daryl, and this is what we agreed to if he chose not to roll up. During our practice, Daryl sometimes rolled up and sometimes we did the bow rescue. I knew if I saw his hands come up in the air, he wanted to use my hands for the rescue, and that he was not going to try to roll up. Keeping good communication with your partner through a practice session is really important. Daryl is hanging out in balance brace, and he's going to go for the capsize and recovery to balance brace on his left side. Pretty cool. I know how difficult this is. After the capsize, you can see that Daryl is struggling with getting the paddle to the surface of the water. The paddle is deep and his left shoulder sinks. When you are learning, this is a patience game. Daryl's position after the capsize, when he is going for a return to balance brace, was pretty good. If he could have waited longer in that position so that he could get the paddle to the surface, I think he would have recovered just fine. But he goes for the recovery too soon, doesn't keep his head back, and ends up capsizing. But he rolls up nicely. This is a really important point in Daryl's progression. Rather than keeping at it, we went back a step and just worked on getting him more comfortable with the balance brace on his left side with the little storm paddle. Please keep this in mind. If you fail at something 2 or 3 times, stop what you are doing. Don't let your mind map too many failures. Go back 1 step in your learning progression and get that step dialed. Then move on to the next harder step. Here, Daryl has taken that step back and is just working on his left side balance brace. He's just hanging out in balance brace with his kayak and a little storm paddle, getting more comfortable with how everything feels. More comfortable leads to more confident. Now, being a little troublemaker that I am, I took away the storm paddle and gave Daryl the ugly duckling. As you move your way down in the buoyancy of what you are holding in your hand, your movements have to be slower. Take your time and try to maintain your balance the whole time, from entering the water to recovering to the back deck. Going slow lets you really feel whether you are balanced. And as soon as you start to lose balance, do your best to correct it. The ugly duckling does not have much buoyancy, and you can see Daryl's trailing arm start to drop when he eases his upper body onto the water. But he learned a lot with the storm paddle, and he doesn't need much help from me. He has learned how to correct his position and get the paddle to the surface of the water before he recovers to the back deck. Here, Daryl goes for the capsize and recovery to balance brace. As he was recovering from the capsize and back to balance brace, I was literally saying, wait, 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 until the paddle was on the surface. He was patient and waited until he could feel that the paddle was on the surface and his right shoulder was flat on the water. His recovery is smooth. John and the ugly duckling got along pretty well. I was working with Daryl's daughter, Sarah. She was in her first day in a Greenland-style rolling kayak. So I didn't even get the chance to film John doing just a balance brace with the ugly duckling. When I looked over at him, he was going straight for the capsize and recovery to balance brace. His style is quite different from Daryl's, and he moves a little quicker. Different bodies, different ways of moving. And the two kayaks are also quite different. His NDK Pilgrim is lower volume and has less rocker than Daryl's Reflection. He is a little slow to get his leading arm down and planted onto the rear deck. But there was no stopping this guy. John is going for the capsize and recovery to balance brace on the left side, which is his non-dominant side as well. After his capsize, he does a good leg drive to start bringing the kayak up and then waits patiently for the paddle to reach the surface before he recovers to the back deck. And he uses the quick leg drive trick when he is ready to recover. It is super handy for sea kayaks. Here John is working with the half paddle on his left side, but you can see that his leg drive is just not strong enough. Folks, leg drive is everything, and it has to be aggressive. You have to start it as soon as you start to open yourself up from the closed position of the capsize to the open position of floating your upper body on the water. If you do only one of these things, or you time them wrong, you won't recover. And this just takes a lot of practice. The Norsaq is the throwing stick of the Greenlandic Inuit hunters. From their kayaks, they use the Norsaq to gain further distance when throwing the harpoon. And it is also really useful for learning advanced balance brace techniques. Here I am in Daryl's Reflection. Remember, this kayak is really big for me. I am going into the water really slowly. I cannot let my trailing arm drop, as the Norsaq gives my hand very little buoyancy. Keep all of your movements slow so that you can feel whether you and the kayak are always balanced. As soon as you feel things just start to get out of balance, correct as best you can right away. Don't just keep going hoping things will improve. They won't. I have my head tilted way back to get more of an arch through my spine. This helps me to keep my upper body floating on the surface of the water. I hang out for a bit and then do a little leg drive practice as I get to know the kayak. I go for the capsize, even though I can't fully capsize the Reflection due to its size and design and me being too light for it. But I'm still working to get it back upright so that I can recover to the back deck. In Daryl's first attempt, I help him to get his upper body onto the water. He has very little to help him float his upper body. His water leg and hip are working hard to keep the kayak balanced on its chine, while his torso has to rotate up toward the sky. His upper body and lower body are doing very different things and must move in different directions in different planes. Daryl is able to float his upper body and keep the Norsaq on the surface where it must stay when he is in balance brace. He does a little pry with the Norsaq as he is recovering to the back deck. And this is perfectly fine when you are pulling off a Norsaq balance brace in a sea kayak. Daryl doesn't need me here. His trailing arm starts to drop with the Norsaq, but he keeps his left hand firmly on the back deck, which lengthens his whole body and helps him to better use his water leg to keep the kayak from coming over on top of him. He gets himself sorted out. I am really proud of Daryl's improvement. Each time he goes in, he gets better, and his recovery to the back deck is improving as well. His brain and body are starting to figure things out. And remember, until today, he had never tried balance brace with a Norsaq. John, of course, is over there nailing the capsize and return to balance brace. His leg drive is a little weak, which is why he struggles for a second to get the Norsaq back on the surface of the water. But that's nothing a little more practice can't fix. If you are working on capsizing and returning to balance brace before you recover to the back deck, but it's just not going well, then go back a step. Practice going into balance brace with the Norsaq, and once you are balanced, practice some leg drive. Try being gentle with your leg drive and then being more aggressive, and feel the difference. Folks, if you are still with me and you want to learn to balance brace with nothing in your hands but the water, then far out. That's pretty great. By now, you have heard me say go slow a whole bunch of times, but you cannot hear it enough. Ease your upper body onto the water and don't let your trailing arm drop. That is exactly what it's going to want to do. Through the whole exercise, just stay attuned to feeling balanced. Everything. Your kayak, your torso floating on the water, your head back, your water leg and hip engaged. Then practice some leg drive. When you are ready to recover, do it slowly and drive your head a little further down into the water just before you sweep your torso onto the back deck. This will make it just a little easier to get onto the back deck. I had to work my butt off in their reflection. Literally. You can see my trailing arm start to drop down. This is not where I want it. To fix this, I lifted my left butt cheek up out of the seat, really stretched out my left leg and drove it into the thigh brace, and rotated my hip hard away from the water. That got me back in balance. John's technique is so good here. There is nothing I would change. He is patient, his body movement is precise, and his leg drive is strong. His head stays well back until the kayak is fully back upright. Nice. I showed John the setup for a hand roll, which, of course, he went for. Things are going great, but then you can see where his leg drive was weak and he had a hard time getting the kayak back up on its chine. He pulled it off, though. What a recovery! Here, John is trying balance brace on his left side. Remember, folks, this stuff is hard. His trailing arm starts to drop, and his leading arm doesn't lock onto the back deck soon enough, thus limiting the effectiveness of his water leg. I'm showing this clip because it's exactly what John needs to do on his left side. He just needs more practice getting into position, hanging out there, and practicing his leg drive. I had so much fun making this video, and I'm so grateful to my friends for helping me. They showed up on 2 very cold days this winter, with lots of rain and a water temperature of about 5 degrees C. We filmed this in Eagle Harbor, West Vancouver, British Columbia.
Daryl, that's such a girlish kind of paddle. That's such a girlish paddle. Are you sure you want to be photographed with that? Ah!
This is Sarah, my friend Daryl's daughter. She really likes rolling, but she'd never been in a Greenland-style rolling kayak, so this was her first crack at it. And I'd say she took to it like a fish to water.